A cruise ship is basically a floating city with unlimited food and zero responsibilities. Yet some people look at that paradise and decide it's the perfect place to commit deeply confusing felonies. Today, we are breaking down 12 completely absurd, mind-boggling reasons passengers were permanently banned from the ocean. Prepare your brain for absolute chaos. 1. We have all experienced the delicate dance of navigating a narrow cruise ship hallway, dodging room service trays, housekeeping carts, and the occasional discarded pair of shoes. But for Gary, a 58-year-old logistics manager from Chicago, the presence of rented mobility scooters parked outside cabin doors on Deck 8 was not a minor inconvenience. It was a catastrophic failure of maritime urban planning. Gary decided that if the ship's security wasn't going to enforce a clear path policy, he would assume jurisdiction. On day 3 of an Alaskan cruise, Gary visited the ship's gift shop, purchased 2 heavy-duty luggage straps, and went to his cabin to fashion a makeshift towing harness. At roughly 2:45 in the morning, dressed in a high-visibility yellow cycling jacket he brought from home, Gary began his impound operation. He systematically hooked his straps to the front bumpers of unattended mobility scooters and dragged them, backward and squeaking, over 300 feet of carpet to a secluded crew access alcove near the aft laundry room. But Gary was a man of procedure, not just a vigilante. For every scooter he relocated, he slid a personalized citation under the victim's cabin door, written entirely on cocktail napkins. The citations formally declared that the vehicle had been impounded for zone violations and demanded a $50 administrative release fee, payable directly to cabin 81144. By 7 a.m., 9 elderly passengers were completely stranded in their rooms, and the guest services desk was dealing with what they assumed was an organized high-stakes scooter theft ring. The ship's security team immediately reviewed the hallway cameras, expecting to find a group of mischievous teenagers. Instead, they watched 20 minutes of footage featuring a heavily perspiring, 58-year-old man in neon yellow, grunting loudly as he deadlifted a 300-pound motorized vehicle into an elevator. When 3 security officers finally knocked on Gary's door, he did not apologize. He simply stepped into the hallway holding a clipboard, handed the chief of security an invoice for overnight storage fees, and asked if the cruise line would validate his parking. He was escorted off the ship in Juneau that same afternoon, permanently banned from the company, and forced to walk down the pier while carrying his own luggage straps. 2. If you think securing a pool lounger on a cruise ship is a casual morning activity, let me assure you it is actually a ruthless psychological blood sport. But Brenda, a 48-year-old from New Jersey, was tired of playing by the rules. She was absolutely furious that the deck patrol kept removing her strategically placed flip-flops whenever she abandoned her chairs for a 3-hour breakfast. On day 4 of a tropical sailing, Brenda escalated from passive-aggressive towel placement to full-scale tactical fortification. At exactly 4:30 in the morning, she marched up to the adults-only solarium equipped with 4 heavy-duty titanium bicycle U-locks and a bag of industrial zip ties. She meticulously arranged 3 prime front-row loungers, zipped their frames together into an unmovable megastructure, and securely U-locked the entire formation directly to the ship's polished brass safety railing. At 7 a.m., the deck manager discovered the barricade. Because the crew couldn't move the chairs to pressure wash the deck, the chief engineer had to be summoned with an electric angle grinder to slice through the titanium locks, shooting aggressive showers of sparks all over the expensive teakwood flooring. When Brenda finally arrived at 10:15 a.m., sipping a margarita and ready to tan, she didn't apologize for treating a billion-dollar vessel like a downtown bike rack. Instead, she gathered the severed chunks of her locks, marched directly to guest services, slammed the metal pieces onto the counter, and demanded a $200 onboard credit to compensate for the destruction of her personal security equipment. She was handed a lifetime ban before her ice even melted. 3. There is an unspoken, universally understood rule at the cruise ship buffet. Wrapping a single banana in a napkin to eat later on your balcony is perfectly acceptable, but treating the carving station like a wholesale grocery warehouse is not. Martha, a 65-year-old retired accountant from Calgary, fundamentally rejected this rule. She arrived on her 7-night Caribbean cruise equipped with a 32-piece nesting set of commercial-grade plastic Tupperware containers. For the first 2 days, she operated in the shadows, quietly securing extra dinner rolls and grapes. But on night 3, during the heavily advertised seafood extravaganza, Martha launched a hostile takeover. Bypassing the standard ceramic plates entirely, she marched up to the ice sculpture display, slid her largest rectangular container directly under the sneeze guard, and aggressively scooped 6 pounds of chilled peel-and-eat shrimp, followed by an entire tray of smoked salmon. When a visibly stunned head waiter approached and politely whispered that food must be consumed in the dining area, Martha snapped the plastic lid shut with the sharp, echoing crack of a gunshot. She looked the waiter dead in the eye, claimed she suffered from a rare metabolic deficiency that required hourly shrimp intake, and attempted to speed walk away. Unfortunately, the cheap canvas tote bag she was using could not support the sheer, wet mass of stolen seafood. The strap violently snapped, sending the containers crashing to the linoleum floor and turning the dessert station walkway into a slippery, shrimp-covered ice rink. She was permanently banned for creating a maritime biohazard. 4. I want you to genuinely ask yourself, how much do you hate paying for late-night food? For 34-year-old Marcus, a software engineer from Vancouver, avoiding the cruise line's late-night room service fee wasn't just a preference, it was a personal crusade. Marcus realized that during breakfast and lunch hours, the ship's buffet offered unlimited free basic ingredients. So he packed his largest checked suitcase not with clothing, but with a commercial-grade double panini press, an electric air fryer, a heavy-duty vacuum sealer, and 3 extension cords. His plan was to open an unlicensed, heavily discounted ghost kitchen directly out of his interior cabin on Deck 7. For the first 2 days, Marcus operated like a stealth operative. He would visit the buffet with an oversized tote bag, casually loading it with 50 slices of plain bread, massive blocks of cheddar cheese, raw tomatoes, and packets of mayonnaise. By 11 p.m., when the ship's restaurants closed, Marcus's operation woke up. He taped a handmade flyer inside the midship elevators, featuring a QR code that linked to a secret WhatsApp group he named Deck 7 Deli. The concept was wildly successful. Drunk passengers returning from the nightclub could message Marcus, and for $5 cash, he would deliver a hot, crispy, dangerously greasy grilled cheese sandwich directly to their cabin doors. By night 4, Marcus was running a high-volume culinary empire from a 100-square-foot room. However, his downfall was not a lack of demand, but a failure of electrical engineering. A commercial panini press and a double air fryer running simultaneously draw an immense amount of wattage, significantly more than a standard cabin outlet is designed to handle. At roughly 2:00 a.m. on a Friday, Marcus blew the central circuit breaker for the entire aft section of his deck, plunging 40 cabins into absolute darkness. When the ship's engineering and security teams rushed to the scene to investigate a strong smell of burning cheese, they kicked open Marcus's door expecting an inferno. Instead, they found him standing in his underwear, wearing a professional chef's apron, desperately waving a towel at the smoke alarm while attempting to flip 4 sandwiches in the dark. He was immediately shut down, confined to his room, and handed a lifetime ban for operating a severe fire hazard. But here is the absolute masterpiece of a twist that elevated Marcus from a mere nuisance to a maritime legend. When security confiscated his equipment and audited his operation, they discovered he hadn't just been hoarding cash. Marcus had forged a highly complex logistical partnership with 3 elderly passengers who utilized mobility scooters. He was paying them in free sandwiches to act as his high-speed delivery fleet, allowing them to quietly zoom down the long hallways with hot paninis resting in their front baskets. Furthermore, he wasn't just accepting $5 bills. He was actively taking official casino chips as payment. When the furious hotel director handed him his disembarkation papers, Marcus calmly pulled a velvet pouch from his mattress, dumped $1,800 worth of $5 casino chips onto the vanity desk, and sternly demanded that the cruise line cash out his small business earnings before throwing him off the vessel. 5. The majestic ocean has inspired centuries of scientific inquiry, but for Simon, a 42-year-old software developer, it was just a giant testing zone for amateur physics experiments. Around noon on a perfectly clear sea day, Simon decided he needed to visually calculate the ship's exact nautical speed by dropping items off the deck 10 promenade and timing their descent. He started small, casually tossing a green apple over the metal railing with a digital stopwatch in his hand. When that failed to produce a satisfying splash, he escalated his methodology. He strolled into the nearby buffet, grabbed an untouched watermelon from the fruit carving display, marched back outside, and hurled it into the sea like an Olympic shot putter. The experiment might have ended there, but Simon needed an object with significant aerodynamic drag to truly finalize his data. He calmly unhooked a heavy, aluminum-framed pool lounger, dragged it to the edge, and shoved it directly over the side. Unfortunately for Simon, the ship was utilizing its lower promenade deck for a scenic outdoor yoga class. The metal chair plummeted downwards, missed the ocean entirely, and violently smashed into the wooden deck mere feet away from a group of terrified seniors attempting the downward dog pose. When security sprinted over and wrestled him away from the railing, Simon was still staring intently at his timer. He didn't apologize to the screaming instructor. He simply adjusted his glasses and complained that the sudden interruption had completely ruined his terminal velocity calculations. He was handed a lifetime ban for essentially launching an airstrike on a wellness group. 6. Operating a drone on a cruise ship is strictly prohibited for obvious safety reasons, but a 62-year-old amateur filmmaker named Robert believed his creative vision superseded maritime law. Robert had booked a Mediterranean cruise with the sole intention of shooting a sweeping, cinematic documentary about the majesty of the ocean, using a massive, professional-grade quadcopter that sounded like a swarm of angry mechanical hornets. On the first sea day, rather than launching it from an open deck where the crew could easily spot him, Robert deployed the drone directly from his narrow balcony on Deck 9. His plan was to capture a dramatic tracking shot along the side of the vessel. At 6 in the morning, while hundreds of passengers were peacefully sleeping with their balcony doors cracked open to hear the waves, Robert's buzzing plastic monstrosity began hovering roughly 3 feet outside their glass doors. He slowly maneuvered the drone up and down the port side of the ship, inadvertently filming people in various states of undress and morning confusion. The expedition came to an abrupt, violent halt when the drone reached a balcony on Deck 11. An elderly gentleman from Texas, entirely unamused by a camera peering into his room before his morning coffee, stepped outside, picked up a heavy hardcover romance novel his wife had left on the table, and threw it with the precision of an Olympic athlete. The book struck the drone dead center, snapping 2 propellers and sending the $3,000 piece of equipment plummeting into the Mediterranean Sea. The truly unbelievable part of this incident wasn't the unauthorized flight, it was Robert's reaction. Instead of hiding, he marched directly to the guest services desk, slammed a printed receipt on the counter, and demanded that the cruise line immediately refund him for the drone, track down the man who threw the book, and execute a deep-sea salvage operation to retrieve his memory card. When the furious captain summoned him to the bridge to inform him of his lifetime ban for violating international privacy and aviation protocols, Robert simply sighed, crossed his arms, and accused the entire crew of attempting to censor independent journalism. He was confined to his cabin for the remainder of the voyage, completely oblivious to the fact that half the ship was actively cheering his financial loss. 7. The ship's casino is specifically designed to be an environment of free-flowing movement and casual spending. But 55-year-old Susan from Phoenix decided to introduce the concept of medieval siege warfare to the slot machines. Susan believed she had discovered a mathematically guaranteed hot machine, a flashing, aggressively loud penny slot themed around animated leprechauns, located directly in the main walkway. After winning a minor jackpot of $80 on Tuesday afternoon, she became utterly convinced the machine was gearing up for a life-changing payout and simply refused to abandon her post. When hunger struck around dinner time, Susan didn't surrender her seat to go to the buffet. Instead, she initiated a hostile architectural lockdown. She dragged 3 heavy velvet chairs from the nearby high-stakes blackjack tables to form a defensive semicircular barricade around her stool. She then unspooled an entire roll of bright yellow caution tape she had inexplicably packed in her checked luggage, tying it between the heavy chairs, the adjacent machines, and a nearby decorative pillar to create a personalized, highly visible quarantine zone. When the visibly confused casino manager approached and politely informed her that she could not build structural fortifications on the maritime gaming floor, the situation rapidly deteriorated. Susan reached deep into her oversized leather purse, pulled out a thick braided steel bicycle cable, wrapped it tightly around her waist, and padlocked herself directly to the metal base of the slot machine. She looked the manager dead in the eye, took a defiant bite of a crushed granola bar, and stated she was legally claiming squatters' rights on the progressive jackpot. The casino had to be partially shut down for 45 minutes, while the ship's engineering team arrived with heavy-duty industrial bolt cutters to physically detach a fully grown, loudly protesting woman from a flashing entertainment box. She was handed a lifetime ban and escorted back to her cabin, furiously insisting that the cruise line was actively conspiring to steal her imaginary fortune. If you are enjoying these absurd tales of maritime stupidity and want to hear more, please take a quick second to hit the like and subscribe buttons. It is completely free, highly appreciated, and requires absolutely zero bolt cutters to execute. 8. You have probably walked past a ship's complimentary art auction and happily grabbed a glass of free champagne, but I guarantee you have never viewed the event as an all-you-can-carry buffet of terrible decor. During a sea day on a major American cruise line, a 39-year-old plumber named Greg attended the afternoon auction in the main atrium. Greg had aggressively consumed 4 complimentary glasses of cheap sparkling wine within the first 20 minutes and fundamentally misunderstood the core mechanics of an auction. He believed that because the champagne was free, the art resting on the wooden easels was also part of an interactive giveaway. While the auctioneer was enthusiastically detailing the brushstrokes of a heavily overpriced framed lithograph of a cartoon dog, Greg simply walked up to the front, nodded approvingly, lifted the heavy 3-foot frame off the display easel, and started casually walking toward the elevators. The auctioneer froze mid-sentence, assuming it was a bizarre joke. When an art gallery associate sprinted after Greg and politely asked him to return the $3,500 piece, Greg firmly clutched the painting to his chest like a defensive lineman holding a football. He loudly slurred that he had successfully claimed it, arguing that since nobody had yelled dibs, maritime salvage laws applied to the atrium. Security had to forcibly pry the cartoon dog from his hands while he was in the elevator. He received a lifetime ban for attempted grand larceny fueled by sparkling wine. 9. Cruise ship casinos are highly regulated, meticulously controlled environments where the house always holds the ultimate advantage. But Julian, a 42-year-old high school math teacher, firmly believed he could offer a superior product. Outraged by the minimum bet requirements at the official blackjack tables, Julian decided to establish a rogue, competing casino directly inside the ship's desperately quiet reading library. Julian had packed a professional, green felt craps layout, authentic casino dice, a wooden rake, and a massive heavy suitcase filled with 500 high-quality, generic clay poker chips. On the 4th sea day, he moved 3 mahogany reading tables together, draped his green felt over them, and officially opened for business. He didn't just sit there waiting for people, he actively recruited. Julian quietly walked through the ship's actual casino, whispering to passengers who had just lost hands, offering them better odds, no minimums, and free miniature pretzels he had hoarded from the bar. Within 2 hours, the silent library had transformed into a chaotic underground gambling den. 20 highly enthusiastic adults were aggressively blowing on dice and cheering loudly, completely surrounded by towering shelves of maritime history encyclopedias. Julian was operating as the dealer, the pit boss, and the bank, wearing a cheap plastic visor and rapidly calculating payouts in his head. The ship's security only discovered the operation when an elderly woman marched up to the guest services desk, furiously complaining that the Annex Casino on Deck 6 didn't have any cocktail waitresses. When 6 security officers raided the library, they expected to find a group of friends playing a casual game of cards. Instead, they found a fully operational syndicate with a designated craps shooter and a waitlist written on the back of a bookmark. Julian was immediately shut down. His felt was rolled up, and he was informed of his permanent fleet-wide ban. The situation seemed resolved, but this is where Julian's mathematical genius and sheer audacity reached a completely unbelievable level. When security audited his operation in a back office, they realized Julian had executed a flawless financial manipulation. He wasn't taking cash from the passengers. He knew cash was too risky to hold. Instead, Julian had told his players that his library casino was a cashless system. He had forced all 20 players to go to the ship's official casino, charge thousands of dollars in official cruise line chips to their room accounts, and bring those chips to him to play at his table. Because he actually knew the mathematical odds of craps better than his drunken patrons, he had absolutely cleaned them out. By the time security raided him, Julian was sitting on $6,000 in official, legitimate cruise line casino chips. When the furious hotel director threatened to call port authorities, Julian calmly leaned back in his chair, cited the cruise line's own written policy that official chips are legally treated as onboard tender, and stated that the ship legally owed him $6,000. The cruise line was forced to quietly cash him out before escorting him down the gangway, essentially making them fund the single greatest rogue casino heist in maritime history. 10. There is a very specific type of delusion required to look at a billion-dollar, heavily populated maritime vessel and treat it like your local suburban driving range. Arthur, a 68-year-old retired dentist from Ohio, possessed exactly this brand of delusion. Arthur had snuck a single titanium golf club and a sleeve of professional-grade golf balls onto his luxury Caribbean sailing. On the third morning, right around sunrise, Arthur strolled onto the empty, open-air sports deck. He confidently placed a folded pool towel on the synthetic grass, teed up his ball, and prepared to blast it directly into the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. Unfortunately, Arthur severely overestimated his own athletic ability and completely ignored the 30-knot crosswind. He took a massive, aggressive swing. He did not hit it straight. He violently sliced the ball to the right. The rock-hard, dimpled projectile bypassed the ocean entirely, curved sharply backward, and ricocheted off a metal ventilation funnel with a terrifyingly loud ping. It then shot straight through the open double doors of the buffet, directly one deck below, violently shattering the glass sneeze guard of the omelet station and landing perfectly inside a steaming tray of breakfast sausages. When security found him, Arthur was still holding his follow-through pose, staring blankly at his empty tea. He was permanently banned and billed for the buffet damages, mostly because he had the sheer audacity to ask the furious head chef if he could have his ball back. 11. We have all seen those viral videos of pier runners, the panicked passengers sprinting down the dock as their cruise ship slowly pulls away. But 26-year-old Chloe and her best friend Jessica refused to be a cautionary tale. After losing track of time drinking enormous sugary cocktails at a beach club in Cozumel, they arrived at the port exactly 45 minutes after their megaship had dropped its mooring lines. Most rational adults would immediately head to the airport to book a flight to the next destination. Chloe, however, decided that maritime departure times were merely suggestions. Using $200 in cash, she hired a local fisherman in a battered 12-foot fiberglass dinghy to aggressively chase the retreating 150,000-ton vessel. For 20 minutes, the tiny boat violently bounced across the massive wake of the cruise ship, getting terrifyingly close to the churning propellers. When they finally pulled alongside the towering steel hull, Chloe realized a fundamental flaw in her action movie plan. Cruise ships do not have low-hanging ropes for you to climb. Standing up in the aggressively rocking dinghy, wearing a wet bathing suit and holding a half-empty souvenir cup, Chloe began screaming at a balcony on Deck 5, demanding that someone throw her a bedsheet so she could hoist herself up like a pirate. The captain, watching this unfold on the bridge cameras in sheer disbelief, had to completely stop the ship's engines to prevent the tiny boat from being sucked underneath the hull. The local Port Authority police were dispatched immediately. When Chloe and Jessica were finally pulled from the dinghy by angry Mexican Marine officers, Chloe was not apologetic. She simply yelled up at the towering cruise ship, complaining that the captain was being incredibly rigid about his schedule. She was handed a lifetime ban before her feet even touched dry land again. 12. The shore excursion desk on a major luxury line is a place of highly organized, incredibly expensive logistics, which is exactly why 40-year-old Richard from Florida saw it as a market ripe for disruption. Disgusted by the $150 price tag for a basic 3-hour cultural tour, Richard decided to launch a pirate tourism operation right in the middle of a 4,000-passenger vessel. Utilizing the complimentary printer in the ship's internet cafe, he produced dozens of glossy flyers for a company he invented that morning called Richie's Authentic Explorations. He spent his sea days secretly slipping these flyers inside the daily planners at the coffee shop and leaving them on vacant pool loungers. His pitch was simple: a $40 deeply immersive Mexican historical tour in Cozumel, payable exclusively in cash directly to him. If you think the story ends with Richard simply getting caught handing out flyers, you severely underestimate the entrepreneurial spirit of a man from Florida. On port day, Richard successfully gathered a group of 18 gullible, deal-hunting seniors in the ship's main atrium at 8 a.m. Holding a makeshift flag constructed from a rolled-up casino advertisement taped to a selfie stick, he confidently marched his clients off the ship, bypassed the official tour buses entirely, and hailed 4 local taxis on the street. He instructed the drivers, using heavily broken Spanish, to take them to a generic, slightly abandoned strip mall 2 miles inland. There, Richard gathered the group in front of a dilapidated, closed-down pharmacy and delivered a highly dramatic 30-minute fabricated lecture about how the parking lot was constructed over an ancient sacred sacrificial ground. He concluded the cultural experience by feeding his tour group stale tortilla chips he bought at an adjacent gas station. The cruise line's security team caught wind of his operation because one of his seniors had proudly bragged to the cruise director about the incredible bargain they had found. Security was waiting for Richard at the gangway upon his return. They confiscated his makeshift flag, escorted him to his cabin, informed him of his lifetime ban, and placed a guard outside his door to ensure he didn't leave until disembarkation. The situation was contained, his pirate business was dismantled, and Richard was completely isolated. But this is the twist that elevated Richard from a mere nuisance to an absolute shipboard legend. Richard had multiple revenue streams. At exactly 2 p.m., while Richard was securely locked in his cabin under strict guard, a group of 24 elderly passengers wearing plastic shower caps and carrying notepads aggressively breached the swinging doors of the ship's main commercial kitchen. They marched right past the screaming maitre d', completely ignoring the sanitation protocols, and demanded the VIP secret galley and sauce tasting tour they had each paid Richard $60 to attend. The executive chef dropped a massive tray of beef Wellingtons in sheer horror as 24 retirees began poking at the industrial ovens with their walking canes, loudly asking the kitchen staff where the secret sauce vault was located. Richard hadn't just run excursions off the ship, he had sold imaginary, highly restricted backstage access on it. When the furious hotel director stormed down to Richard's cabin to scream at him over the kitchen invasion, Richard calmly adjusted his collar, handed over a stack of $1 bills as a refund, and asked if the cruise line was currently hiring independent contractors for their upcoming European season. Which of these 12 absolute menaces do you think genuinely believes they were the victim? Tell me in the comments whose delusional apology you'd pay to read. If you want to keep watching entitled adults lose their vacation privileges, hit the like and subscribe buttons. It's the only way to ensure the algorithm doesn't recommend you to a pirate ship.